Role model is actually what won this week. One of the ones that's actually been on there since the start, since I started these polls. And who better for Fairy Tail to really line up as Gildarts Clive? I know a lot of people would probably set him more as like a father figure for Natsu, but that's really what Igneo was. Because though there are some scenes where you can kind of make that out between relationships of Natsu and Gildarts, it really just more laid out to me of more like an idol, someone to really kind of like look forward and strive towards. But I've always liked Gildart's character. He's always been a really kind of funny guy in a lot of ways, very goofy, and like even the fact when he was first introduced in the series, they have the Gildart shift for Magnolia, where they literally have to make it so the entrance to Magnolia, the main gate, has a straight path right to the guild because Gildarts will just kind of space out, and because of like how unstable his magic is, it can easily lead to like him brushing up against a building and completely just turning it to dust. And that was just a funny way to really introduce Gildarts' character, and in the introduction of the 100 Years quest, and that laid out, and like even that story like made some pretty good ground for what's going on right now with Acnologia being somehow related to the 100 Years quest. Very fun stuff, the way that that story ended up kind of tying forward. But for the funny thing about Gildarts is Gildarts 1, he actually wasn't originally shown in the manga, like the first parts when it was like mentioned who Gildarts was, because Hiroshima never planned on actually introducing him, because he only like the original runtime for Fairy Tail is only going to be 10 volumes, and then popularity increased it. Later on, we ended up actually getting Gildarts coming back right after the Racion Sace arc, and I think the anime didn't actually name him, because in the manga they actually name him Gildarts. They go and give him by his real name. Whereas in the anime they called him just like the old man, because, or like the geezer, because they also didn't think they weren't certain they were ever going to get to his character. He didn't even show up until what? So yeah, like 166 chapters. So I think he initially got like, hey, Gildarts is coming back in 165, and the anime, whether or not they would get to season 2 at the time of, they probably were unsure, but them getting there. And one of the other things, he always gets compared to Shanks from One Piece. What's funny is their initial designs aren't the same. Shanks, you can kind of get aspects of Shanks during the Marineford arc having similarities to Gildarts. I mean, both of them lost an arm, both of them like have a cloak. Their hair is like a little slicked back, but it's not really the same. And when you have like Shanks, it still has like, it's kind of drawn back, but also kind of like draped over in the front. But their characters. What's funny is that the anime is really where their comparison comes by. Because if you look at the manga panels, like their facial structure, the way that their actual like design is outside the cloak isn't the same. I mean, I think the cloak and the hair is really what did a lot of it. Because even lost an arm, which characters in series like lose a limb, but Shanks never got a new arm. Gildarts immediately got like a prosthetic, actually, and then later getting another one. But it's only second version, and then if you compare the anime, but like obviously like part 3 during the Alvarez arc, Gildarts looks nothing like him. He actually like gets remodeled to look like a Ned Stark from Game of Thrones. But like I said, like personality, their fighting style, their powers, like what they do in the story, like really nothing ties it beyond that. Kind of like a few initial things, but whatever. That's kind of one of those ones where like you'd look at like a character and you kind of like see small aspects and really decide, well, they must be based off of each other. But it's like, no, not really. Like you, I mean, if you look, just go by face value and nothing beyond that of small tidbits. But Gildarts' character, the way that he was originally kind of like laid out, like we found out stuff about Acnologia, when he was first really kind of mentioned in the story as the Black Dragon that Gildarts met on, the 100 Years quest on Mount Zonia. There wasn't a whole lot beyond that, his character, because he wasn't in Edelus, but he did take a pretty good part in Sirius Island. He was one of the test proctors in the S-Class exam, and who Natsu ended up going against during that round. And what was funny was he was actually just going to let Natsu pass when he, stood his ground against him and did a pretty good strategy, pretty much just using sheer numbers with the whole split up tiny Natsus, and then once he combined back, having that chance to get an attack on a Gildarts. Obviously, it did no damage, but it did kind of move him back a little bit. And Gildarts took that as, pretty much a pass. Because obviously, Gildarts going into Natsu at the time, there was no fathomable way that Gildarts was going to lose. The power gap was absurd. And when you have that in mind, it's like, I don't expect you to beat me to win. I expect you to have some display that really can get. And obviously, like, even S class, like, yeah, you just meeting the kind of threshold for S class, being able to move Gildarts and like get a hit on him in that manner was still pretty impressive. Like Gildarts isn't the threshold to become S class. Gildarts is like even back then he was absurdly like high wizard saint level, and then we see him when he comes back and Spriggan tier, one of the only characters that was assumed would be able to 1v1 a member of Spriggan 12, and was. So that aspect of him was pretty nice. But then when Natsu's like, I don't want to advance beyond this role into S class unless I can beat you or any of these other S class guys, and Gildarts, knowing him, decided to teach him a lesson. And showed Natsu, I think, one of his most vibrant character development points. Like there's some good ones prior, like when he learned about forgiveness during Alvarez Empire Arc, the Flame of Rebuke and forgiving Jalal for what he did. But this was a much heavier one because it was much more, I think, noticeable is when Natsu was facing up against a Gildarts actually flexing his power, and he ran into a problem because he as a character was much more of a jump into the fray of things and improvise during the fight. Figure out what to do during the heat of things. Don't really go into the occasion of, with really much of a strategy. And this whole scenario, when going against Gildarts, and it wasn't like a life or death thing, because there's a whole different kind of case when you're fighting an opponent where you have to. This is like, if you don't do it, certain things are going to happen, like when he went up 0. And with Gildarts, it was much more of just like a fight where he realized he can't win, and there was no real point in getting into this winless battle without any reasoning, and then dropping to it. And obviously Gildarts stronger than anyone he fought at that point, but just dropping to his knees and Natsu giving up, and Gildarts explaining to him that obviously like bravery and courage and the ability to like go into a fight that you're not sure you're going to win is like a very strong aspect to a person, and not a lot of people have that. But even fewer people would have have that ability to, when they go into that scenario, they're ready to kind of like draw back, sheath their sword, and and assess the situation when they really can't win this, and when they have to give up the fight, really. And it was that kind of like acknowledgement of one's own weakness and fear that Gildarts talked about, it not being evil. When you actually can acknowledge where you're weak at, what you're afraid of, and how what areas that you need to improve on, that's a big sign of becoming a stronger character, when you can kind of assess your own faults. And not to having that kind of like speech near the end when they're fighting Hades, and they're all very scared of like him using Nemesis on him, and then him just kind of like giving back the speech that Gildarts gave him was really nice. And that's one of the things I think of more of like a role model character for him. Like obviously he's had some good like 1v1 kind of moments with Gildarts, but I think it much more of like I said, a role model kind of aspect, because one of the things is he wasn't just that to Natsu, he was that to a lot of members of the guild. And even on a personal note, we still got like Gildarts when he came back, when Blue Note was going crazy and wreaking havoc on the island, that when he got more pissed off, not just like, oh, these guys attacked the island. It's he says like how like youthful people, they have a lot more like starry-eyed determination towards events and moments of their life, and how excited they were about the S-Class exam. It was a big step for, each of them to move forward. And the members of Grimoire Heart just straight up, like, trampled all over their determination and enthusiasm. That's what really pissed him off. And that was really cool for him, because, like I said, you can kind of see, like, a fatherly model, but to Gildarts, it's more of, him looking at this younger generation and, how he expects them to kind of, like, take everything going on, and how he looks at them more as this, potential of youth, of the next generation of people to follow up from him. And that was really just pretty awesome of him. But not only that, just that fight in general was pretty sick. And he just crumbles that black hole and then knocks the dude literally miles above the cloud layer. Because I actually looked into that, because it's like tropical storm clouds, which is I think like 10 kilometers up in the sky. And Gildarts, like people have looked into like the size of that hole because obviously it doesn't look too big, but that's a 10 kilometer away sized hole. And Gildarts created that in a time frame of like Rusty Rose, because like in the whole time frame, just I'm looking at like crazy accomplishments because Gildarts has I think the most consistent displays of how like overpowered he is. Obviously, like Gildarts isn't the same as like a villain. Like Seraph was very powerful, like Nologi is very powerful, but literally every single time that Gildarts was just showing up, he did something ridiculous. And I guess I mean to say it more of like on the side of not being a villain, because obviously when you have a villain, they're going to be a lot more different, or an antagonist, some of them. But I think it was like Gildarts sent Blue Note above the cloud layer. I think including the cloud, like the base cloud layer is like 10 kilometers. I think it's like another 10 until you reach like the over the top of it for tropical storms. And within the time it took for Rusty Rose to kind of like fall over from, like getting knocked up in the air and then falling over like a couple feet from Freed's attack, Blue Note was already beyond that, like kilometers up, like probably like 10, like somewhere between like 10 to 20 kilometers, possibly more. And in the time it took, like in this panel, you see like he's maybe a couple dozen feet up in the air, and that cloud layer is already split open. And that's the level of speed and force into that attack is so crazy. I really want to see like a spin-off of Gildarts so bad. I just want to see him going on adventures of fighting monsters and trying to get laid all the time. And especially on the fact that he does pull a lot, because I almost concluded that panel because it's such an iconically funny scene when he finds out Cana is his daughter, and he's like just trying to figure out who the mom is, and he names off like 12 girls like right off the bat. And that's not his total. Like that's like ones to come to mind, but he's probably putting an age in the factor. Probably like Cana's. Well, he mentions afterwards like the color of it, like her hair. He's probably like the fact that he travels. He's probably banged out a lot of tropical foreign girls. He probably took like her ethnic background into account, the fact that she's a white girl, but that Gildarts funny in all aspects, badass in all aspects, great design and play in all aspects. And then when you see him come back later during that, like also the fact when he had that the silent chapter when he had two, because there was the one like was it 299 and you see him pretty much just like run into a girl getting harassed by some monsters, and scares them off, finds their village, runs into her, finds they've been kind of like harassed by this like mountain troll kind of creature, beats them, ends up like getting a festival thrown for him, and appreciation. And the girl that he saved earlier that was afraid of him ends up like seemingly want to have sex with him, and then he's like super stoked. And then he sees like events from the Grand Magic Games, Cana's display, and he's excited to see his daughter like making big waves. Excited, runs around, trips, and like splits up this whole village. Like him, no magic, just falling over the force like split up this entire area, and then they're obviously all afraid of him and kick him out, and he continues his journey. And then another one when he meets up with Natsu like right after the Alvarez arc, another silent one, and he pretty much like they have a little bit of a bout. They have like a little like moment when him and Natsu are having like a heart talk. You can tell because he was kind of like sitting over by some water, thinking to himself, and he talks about probably like events of what happened in the Tartarus arc and the seriousness of it. And then they get into like a little bit of a battle, and Natsu gets like eaten up by like this creature, and Gildarts just straight up like mad like punches down and like splits up in this like mountain, which was just a nice display of him. But obviously him coming back in the end of like the second half of the Alvarez arc, him having a really sick entry, breaking up one of God Serena's spells, and just like obviously it was his story, but him just wrecking him, and going over towards fighting August, and that whole moment when he's like fully displays like even though he only became like apparent to him in like what is it, the Tartarus and Alvarez combined, like in real time, probably only like the whole events like in real time of Sirius Island all the way up to Alvarez for him was probably only because the 3-month factor of Grand Magic Game build up, he obviously went up from that. So probably I'm gonna guess like a year and a half in real time for him. And he fully embraced like the fact that he was a dad. I imagine for him, like getting with many girls as he was, like the fact that he he knew what he was getting into. He knew the risks, and he probably like long prior like accepted like if I ever end up having a kid, I will take full responsibility because he immediately did when he found out about Kana and he like, asked her like the right to be able to love her as a child, and it was really torn him up like the idea of like him having a kid and being so close this whole time, and once like against August and finding out like the way August is like the weakness to his instant copy and learn magic, that he was fully ready to die in the process to take Gildart or to take August out with him, which is and he's currently in a little bit of a mystery because we know that he was at the guild right before Natsu left for the 100 Years quest with everyone. They had that little discussion of what was different about like him going on the quest versus Gildarts is or he's very much a loner. Like he obviously operates a lot by himself all the time, going off on quests all solo. But Natsu obviously going off with his crew, and that was going to be the difference. He had people at his back to help him. He was going to support them on top of that. But with like, I'm very curious to know where he's going to pull on display because the White Witch has taken over most of the guild, and Gildarts is not one of them. I would be very curious to know where Gildarts is right now. I mean, obviously, like he's not vital to what's going on in the story. Him showing up would be really interesting, but at the same time, I am curious. Like maybe Toka end up finding him anyway. That would be really cool to actually finally see like a full-on battle between Natsu and Gildarts because now Natsu could actually fight him and win. Now that he's got like how powerful he is, but he's also got Fire Dragon King mode, Dragon Force, and it would be like a really nice like step point for him because there are people stronger than Gildarts. There was obviously August, Irene, Zereth, the White Witch, any of the dragon gods, Logia. And I would assume any of like the major dragons as well, and whatnot. Possibly Georg, but we don't know about that one. But it would be a really nice kind of stepping stone because there's obviously like a Natsu becoming more powerful than a previous character. Like he's been strong at the max, but obviously with Gildarts, it's been much more of a like a big thing he's looked forward to for a long time. So it would give a lot of character moments to see like him finally get that stage set up and then conquered. But other than that, I always really liked Gildart's character. He's always to me been that character in the series. Like I've mentioned it before. In a lot of series, there's always that character that people just seem to universally like. Black Clover, Yami, My Hero Academia has All Might, Fairy Tail has Gildarts. Regardless if you really like Fairy Tail or you don't like it, I've seen people just generally enjoy Gildarts. I don't see the only time I've ever seen really people have like negative comments about Gildarts is when they try and like say he's a Shanks ripoff. But that's really it. And I've never seen anybody that actually has gone into it, regardless if they like Fairy Tail or not, say I didn't like Gildarts. I didn't think you. I don't know about that. Gildarts was a pretty cool dude. I've just never seen anyone have an actual negative comment towards in from getting into the series. Other than that, tell me what you think about the character. I've always, like I said, I've always really liked him. I love his post-time skip design. I think the heaviest thing is that sick beard and then his awesome coat. But I'm wondering what other moves he's got because we did see a couple more in the Grays spinoff in Ice Trail, and then obviously the one he used against August. I'm really hoping we can get a Gildarts spinoff because it would be you don't need to think of some like crazy plot line for it. Gildarts goes on a really crazy adventure, fights like some powerful dudes. Maybe you add like a little interesting plot to it of like I don't know some dude is trying to take over a kingdom versus whatever, and maybe you could show other countries because there are a lot of countries even in Ishgal alone that we haven't seen, and you could explore them through Gildarts, and I think that would just be a really neat thing to add into the story, and you'd see it through a character that like anyone would enjoy. Nobody would go a Gildarts spinoff. No, nobody's gonna say that. There are a lot of characters that deserve a spinoff. Personally, I think like the Strauss siblings deserve a spinoff, but I could see people being like, I don't really know if I want to see Mira Jade, Lisana, and Elfman get the story. Personally, I would. I just feel like everyone would want to see Gildarts on his own adventure of fighting like always critical mode bad guys and getting laid. But other than that, comment below. Tell me what you think about the character and what you thought about this guy going through. Legitimately, like, does anyone not like Gildarts? I don't think so. And I really appreciate you thumbs up the video, press the like button and subscribe button, and check out my other videos. And I appreciate everyone who's already subscribed, and thank you all for listening. Bye.